Ready graphics? Ready theme? Cue.
Good evening. For your information tonight.
Cross-boarded means they're all mushed together and they're just basically shooting those scenes that are in that location at that time, no matter what episode they are shooting for. So it could be that you are, as an actor, are shooting, if let's say you're in 3 episodes of a television show, you're shooting all your scenes in the same day.
Hi, I'm Jesi Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And I know we always say we're thrilled or that we're excited, but genuinely, this is a guest and a topic that we have been talking about between ourselves for a very long time. We both have personal experience with this human, and it's also a topic that you won't be surprised we're excited to highlight.
Yeah, we really felt, because we talk about, with our experience throughout the episodes, as much as we have time for, our experience as actors from the casting process now. And obviously we've talked extensively on our own and also with the cast and crew of Murphy Brown on the casting process back then, that we really thought that would be interesting to introduce you to what the casting process is now from the point of view of a casting director.
So we will be sharing with you our conversation with the lovely Jodi Angstreich of Laura Rosenthal Casting.
Will the mystery guest please sign in?
Hey, I'm Jodi Angstreich, and I'm a casting director.
Yes, you are. Welcome to the
Thank
podcast.
you.
So we are so excited to have you on the podcast, because we have previously talked about our experiences in casting throughout the episode, but also talked with the cast and crew of Murphy Brown to talk about their casting experience in the 90s. And we've tried to sort of compare it to how it's different today, but we really wanted to have you on so that we could discuss for our listeners just how different it is, and also perhaps just how similar it is as well. But first, we like to talk about origins. So what brought you into casting?
I have a different origin story. I know a lot of casting directors start off as actors or in different areas of the business. Although I acted as a kid, just, local drama clubs, drama camp, whatever, I kind of always wanted to be a casting director from the moment I saw the words. So I would say, I think it was like 6th or 7th grade. I was like 12. I decided I wanted to be a casting director, and it just sort of like was implanted in my head, and I had had tunnel vision. And I'm sure as those who want to be actors and whatever, I definitely had people in my life who were like, computers is a good field. Have you thought about computers? And things like that. I mean, my family was always super supportive. But there have always been people who were like, what's casting? And I didn't really know what it was, obviously. I knew what I thought it was. I knew about auditions. And I used to watch credits all the time. That was like a big part of my, within my viewing, and anytime I would see casting, I would sort of clock it. And between that and E True Hollywood Story, do you guys remember E True Hollywood Story? They would often have casting directors on their shows, and so I just sort of like was drawn to it. And so that, as a kid and then going into high school, I just sort of kind of tunnel visioned into that. And then at some point when I was looking at colleges and things, I called CSA, Casting Society of America, and I was like, hey, like, what should I major in school? Like, whoever answered the phone was just like, whatever you want. And, we recommend that you find an internship. And I was like, oh, okay. I ended up majoring in communications. I had applied to I went to the University of Central Florida. I had applied to the film program and I didn't get in. I wrote a beautiful essay about casting, but I don't think they understood me. And so I ended up with communications, and then I interned around, I grew up in South Florida, and I interned for a small talent agency down there. And the agent there, they no longer exists, but the agent there had said that she felt like I was right about casting and that it would be a good fit for me. And she didn't really connect me in any way, but she encouraged me. And then after college, I moved to New York, and I got my first casting internship, which was the life-changing internship at Lynn Kressel Casting, who was doing the Law and Orders at the time.
Yeah.
And I worked for Suzanne Ryan and Julie Tucker and Lynn Kressel, and they're amazing associates. Stephanie Leffinen, Claire Traeger, and Deborah Leipzig. And I just fell in love like day one. I was like, I'm hooked. I'm in. I was right. I'm lucky. And that was the beginning.
I'm curious, what have you noticed that has changed the most since you started to today as a casting associate director, in the room, out of the room?
It's a technology thing in a major way. I mean, I really feel old sometimes when I'm like talking to the like new batch of assistants and things, and the things that we used to have to do. Going back to that first internship at Lynn Kressel, one of my jobs was to sit on hold with SAG to get contact information for actors. So they would give me this big list because we didn't have IMDb at the time.
Yeah.
They had the player's guidebooks where you would like look through and that would tell you who people were with agent wise, and anybody who wasn't there, or sometimes it wasn't updated because it was a literal book. You would sit on hold with SAG, and SAG had a rule that you could only ask for 3 people at a time. So you would sit on hold for a really long period of time. This was the intern's job. And you would give them 3 names. And sometimes you would be able to beg for a 4th name. And then you would, after your 3 names, you would hang up and you would call again and sit on hold and call and get 3 more names. And it would literally be like, you know, this actor, and they would give you the name of their contact information. And then you would hang up. And I mean, it's absurd if you think about it.
Yeah. What was their reasoning behind that? Did they have any?
I don't know. I think I was too young to even ask. It was just
it was just the way it was.
And as a result, we always knew, and the associates in the office there like knew everyone's reps off the top of their heads in a really big way. So, you know, it would become the issue when somebody had moved, or if somebody was newer, we were trying to find somebody. But the people who came in all the time, they all knew all of their reps. And I was fascinated by that as an intern. Like I was like, you know, all about how the actors that they knew. And I just sort of was drawn in really early on because I had always clocked who actors were, bringing it back to Murphy Brown a little bit, but like I always knew all the actors' names. I always knew I would recognize when a guest actor was on this show and then was on that show. I connected that. And then to like find that in my very first few days of an internship, that everybody in that room always had that, and that it felt like, oh, I found my people, I found my place, you know, within that. But yeah, I think the technology of it, I mean, that's the most basic thing. Obviously we were getting hard copy headshots and resumes. I think that's a huge difference for actors. And now it's so rare to have an in-person audition. So it goes a really wide span as to how technology has changed so much. But I would say IMDb, huge game changer in the industry. And then moving on to digital headshots and resumes and things like that. And just using email more. We also used to, I mean, I literally sound like I'm 110 years old, but we used to fax breakdowns to agents, and then they would fax back their submissions.
I would say I don't think it's 100 years old. I think that technology has advanced so quickly in such a short amount of time, and we've seen things come in, be the new thing, and be replaced so quickly. Yeah, just within office technology, let alone how we submit, how we're known.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy just in the first couple of years, you know, since we've all switched to work from home and all of that stuff, like technology.
Yeah, well, that actually connects to what I was going to say, because I remember when I first moved to New York, you know, going to the offices and dropping off my headshot in a bin, which still at the time was considered like, oh, no, that's not going to work. Don't do that. No one really does that anymore. No one mails things. And I did get some really good auditions from doing it. But now, even if, you know, you might want to do that, people aren't really printing their headshots anymore, let alone they're not in the vicinity, right? You're not really working in your offices as much, so they're not even there to do it. So
people ask us like, you know, oh, how can I get you my headshot and resume? And like the easy answer would be email, but it's like not really, because I don't really want to give my email to thousands of actors.
No, why would you?
Not you know, just to not have a flood of stuff in my inbox, not because of any other reason, but But yes, we totally had those bins. And that was also part of that first internship job, was going through those bins. Certainly at Law and Order, it was like a very big bin.
That was the first one I got when I went over to Chelsea and dropped off my headshot.
Yeah. I was like, it was far away from everything, and people made that journey to drop those pictures in that bin. And
it was a trek.
And at least they were looked at. And it's like, it's harder now. I get, people ask me, actors ask me, what's the alternative to that now? And I don't really have the answer. I'm sure every casting office has their own system for it. But even if it was, I know people have separate emails, or, I know some offices have better websites. We don't really have one, but like if you're submitting, then you actually need to have the casting directors be looking at those as well. Whereas those bins it was more tangible, right? It was just like, the bin is full. Somebody go through the bin, and it was for something that was like episodic television. You had a limited amount of time, but actors could be seen for those parts. So that bin needed to be gone through within a certain amount of days. It was like, within 48 hours or something, those bins were getting, I don't remember what the actual timeline was, but it was pretty quick. Those bins were getting, taken care of when there were interns to go through it. Whereas with emails, it can just sort of sit there, and then it's like, oh, you remember to look at it, and it's like, oh, those parts are cast now. So it's hard, and I don't know there has to become a new technology to help keep up with that, because there's plenty of actors that need to be able to get their hustle on and submit themselves for things in that type of way, but I don't know what that answer is.
Well, that leads to a good question then. Why don't you take us through the process of television casting from the moment you're hired? Like, what is the first step?
Well, I'll add to that, like, just the change in, going back to the earlier question, the state of television in general has changed so much. Just the network shows are even, they aren't doing as many episodes as it once was, and that used to be what it was. And now obviously streaming and all the things. And I think we're in a little, I don't know, growing pains, but whatever it is.
I think so too. Yeah.
Post-COVID, all of that stuff, trying to figure out what the landscape is for television right now seems to be very, I don't know that anybody really knows what it is at this particular moment. Maybe some studio execs know. But
they'll tell us eventually.
Yeah.
They'll tell us eventually. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. What I think is so fascinating about that is, for us who grew up on like 23, 26, 24 episodes of a season, you're seeing a lot of people online who didn't grow up with it. And they're looking back and they're binging shows that they know have a lot of seasons that aren't going to get canceled after 2 years, and they don't have to, put their whole heart into it. And you see people shocked, like, wait, what happened? Why were there 23? Like, why aren't we going back to that? And I'm kind of loving it, because I'm hoping that maybe the need will change that in the industry. I don't know if they're going to listen to people, but people really seem to be clamoring for more episodes of their favorite show as opposed to less, which is nice to see.
I mean, I will say that I personally, if I have to hear one more young person refer to a decent, like, world building episode as filler, I will actually scream, because I think those were so important.
Wait, give me an example. What do you mean?
Oh, this even happened recently with a couple Last of Us episodes, which, again, still considered short form as far as those of us who grew up on, like, long drama series. But saying that these episodes, we've talked recently on the podcast about what is a bottle episode, because people seem to be pushing against episodes that don't actively and aggressively pursue plot, and that we can't take a sidestep over to build the world more, to just emphasize character development to pay off later. And this idea that, like, oh, if it's not progressing the plot in an active, clear way, then it's just wasting time. And I'm like, no.
Because everything needs to happen so fast.
Yeah, it's because, and I don't blame them. It's what they're used to. If you have 8 episodes instead of 23, every episode has to push the narrative forward. But sometimes it's nice to sort of marinate in characters, right? Like to see, who they are in relation to the narrative. Anyway.
Yes, totally.
It's interesting discourse.
Yeah. Well, going back to the how to cast TV. So I haven't been on an episodic show in a while. I've been doing a lot of limited. And so I will speak for that. But I think that generally our process for a TV film limited series is pretty much the same for everything. The difference becomes speed when you're like casting for something that is more of an episodic nature where they need a new episode every week situation as opposed to a binge of we're actually casting everything all at once situation. A lot of the limited series, and certainly I think that maybe for a lot of the episodics that I haven't been working on, also what used to be more of a every once in a while you would get the cross-boarded 2 episodes or something like that, but in general it was like your episode 1 was shooting from this day to this day and episode 2 was shooting from this day to this day. That's no longer.
Can you explain to our audience what crossboarding is if they may not be familiar?
Yeah. So basically what we do now a lot is, so it used the traditional shooting for an episode of television. I'm just making this up a little bit, but like, let's say you have 8 days to shoot an episode of television, and this episode of television is shooting from May 1st to May 8th, and then the next episode is shooting from May 9th to etc. Cross-boarded means they're all mushed together and they're just basically shooting those scenes that are in that location at that time, no matter what episode they are shooting for. So it could be that you are, as an actor, are shooting, if let's say you're in 3 episodes of a television show, you're shooting all your scenes in the same day, for no matter what those episodes are. So in theory, you've got episode 201, 204, and 208 all shooting on May 1st. And so from a casting perspective, it becomes extraordinarily complicated, whereas we used to cast based on which roles are shooting in which episode. Now you sort of have to do it all at the same time, in more of like a film way of you're shooting the entire thing. It doesn't really matter what episode you're in. It also translates to, a lot of people don't realize that casting directors do the majority of the actors' deals. And there are a lot of SAG roles, and now even with the new contract, it's way more complicated than my head has wrapped around, because I haven't been on a television series since the new contract. But the SAG rules say that the actor needs to be paid for each episode. It's not for each day. So it changes the way deal structures are. And sometimes actors really luck out with it. We definitely have had, we always say for each project, it's like there's usually an actor who like wins the episode, or they may only be, it may look like a small role, but they end up making more money because of the way it's shot and the way the SAG rules play out, that they need to get paid for, maybe they only worked the one day, but they're getting paid for a lot more, or whatever it might be. Or sometimes there's just like a lot of hold time in between, which we have to pay you for. And let's say you're working May 1st and again down the line, but it's the same episode. We have to pay you for that. So there's usually one actor who scores, but there's a lot of actors who don't score within that. But we're always like there's that lottery winner actor. So it's basically makes things a little bit more complicated on the casting end when things are super cross-boarded. I use Fleishman Is In Trouble is a good example, which was a limited series that I worked on, that we shot all of the interiors at the top of our shoot and all the exteriors at the end of our shoot, because the whole thing took place in the summer, but we were shooting in the winter. So there were actors who, for the same episode, were working one day in February and one day in May. And so, there's and then there were multiple sometimes within that one day, there would be like 3 episodes they were shooting within those days. So it was sort of all over the place and made things a little bit more complicated. But yeah, that's the very long answer to crossboarding. But it's very typical now.
Hey, for somebody who doesn't know it at all, I think it's necessary for people to hear that. So they're like, yes, crossboarding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not a
it's-
term that I heard until about like probably 10 years ago. So, I think the general public is not familiar with it. So I think that was a great explanation.
It's more common than not now, where I
I would
definitely
assume, yeah.
do remember when we first started doing, it's going to be cross-boarded, like, buckle up. And now it's like, we're expecting it to be cross-boarded. General casting process for us is we usually take the script, we break it down internally. I know there are some casting directors who have breakdown services do an initial breakdown for them. But in our office, we always do our breakdown ourselves. And then we go basically within that break. It's any line that speaks. Sometimes there may be a role that doesn't have scripted lines that seems like they may speak, or sometimes there'll be a direction in there that's like, she yells or something like that, where you feel like there's going to be some vocalization that we'll throw in the breakdown to see if that's something that we're casting or not. But in general, the rule is we'll cast anything one line or up. And then we go over that breakdown with the director, or for TV with the producers, and talk about descriptions for everyone. We talk about the leads and who needs to be a name actor and who they prefer to be a name actor and who they prefer to be an unknown actor. All of those kind of practical things, along with, we always ask for as many adjectives as possible to discuss who the characters are. And so we sort of create the breakdown based on that. Sometimes we send the breakdown back and the director will add in their own things, descriptions. If the writer and director is the same person, that's always wonderful because they usually write beautiful breakdowns for us. And then we make lists is our big thing. And certainly for those roles that are name actors, it's, the known actors that you guys are household names. We make lists of ideas for that. And then we make lists for the roles that are not names, that are just people that we want to see for these roles, that we think would be good for these roles. And we release the breakdown to agents usually. And that goes on breakdown services, usually the service that we use. And then the agents submit their ideas. They send us their pitches. We talk about those. And then we go on to the audition process for those that aren't name actors. And then those that are, we're checking availabilities. We're talking to those agents and doing those things. And then from the auditions, it's narrowing down, sometimes it's a self-tape, sometimes it's a Zoom, sometimes, rarely these days it's live, but we've had a couple of live. And then we narrow down who we send to the director, and then we discuss those with the director. Sometimes the director has a very clear choice. They're like, I want to cast so-and-so. And sometimes it's more of like, I like these three. Let's talk about it. Sometimes they want to see more, and we'll do a callback, whatever it might be. So that's, and then we, in theory, make an offer to the actor, and then get into the deal process. And eventually they show up to set.
So for the roles that aren't offer onlys, how many people do you tend to see? And how does that compare to before COVID, when things were in person?
It's so mixed. I've tried to figure this out a little bit, and I'd love to get a median. I think that it's definitely more in the self-tape world than, when we were live for every audition, there are only so many hours in a day. And so for some, I would say if we were doing a pilot and we had series regular roles that we were seeing those lead actors for, we were seeing a lot, and we would maybe have a couple weeks to do those leads. I don't remember exactly, but let's say we had 3 weeks and you're seeing people five days a week, 40 actors a day. That was the math. It was just, that limited, maybe 60 actors a day, depending on how long the sides are. That's also changed with the new SAG rules. But the longer the sides, the longer it takes us to have those auditions, the less actors there are to be seen. So it's literally just a matter of time in the day. Now with self-tapes, first of all, it's much easier to ask for them. They're also an advance in technology, and that our assistants just sort of click, click, click and send off the auditions to the agents in very computer-wise. When I was an assistant, we had to call, and it was very much that's time-consuming too. It's like, okay, this person at 3:00, this person at 3:30. This, that takes up a certain amount of time. So now it takes a lot less time to get those auditions out into the world with technology, and then we receive those self-tapes in an easier, in theory, an easier way. There's always editing and what have you. And then the hard part is the watching of the self-tapes, which have now become a big part of my nights, as opposed to being during the day. I mean, I still watch plenty during the day, but I don't need to do it during office hours anymore. So because of that, you can see more. And so the actual number, I feel like, will always be higher for leads. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes down, as the roles get smaller and smaller, we'll see less and less. When it comes down to your co-star that are like legit just like under 5 few lines, if you're a barista, that's literally just taking a coffee order and there's no actual character development there. Maybe I'll see 15. And if there's, as you get higher, if there's a little bit more oomph and substance for those roles, then I just had something for a film. There are some smaller roles I was requesting like 60. Wow. So it also depends on how hard the role is to cast to. Like, if we're talking about something where there are a lot of actors out there for it, or sometimes it's super specific and, a role needs to speak 2 languages and be a professional hula hooper, I'm probably going to see 3 people for that. So it's, just a matter of how many people are available for the actual project that are right for the role. And so it kind of goes back and forth with quantity because of that. So it's a tricky one. And as it becomes roles where there are a lot more people for it, it becomes harder to see people who you don't necessarily know as well, mm-hmm. because you want to get in all those people who you know are great. And then the ones who you don't know it's just, again, it's a time in the day. Whereas if there's plenty of time and there's not that many people for the role, then I'm like happy to see as many new people as I can.
I know you said that you recently been working on several limited series projects. Is there a type of project that you get the most excited to cast?
I love to cast kids and teens, young people. That's me. And it works out well because not everybody in my office feels that way. So it works well.
Yeah, I love that you said that.
I get that. Yeah. I love casting kids. We have right now just came out on Thursday, the limited series on Netflix right now. Eric was the last limited.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that. It looks fantastic. Yeah.
We've got a lead kid in that who's just fantastic, and I had just the most fun auditioning kids for those parts. And I like young, new, young people in general. It's something that I always get excited about casting. But other than that, I have kind of eclectic taste. I feel like I just respond to a script, or I don't, it's just, it doesn't mean that I don't work on things that I don't respond to, but I just I'm sort of all over the map on what I like to consume and also what I like to work on.
For you, what is a project that you think was perfectly cast?
There's so many. Mm-hmm. I used this example in another interview, and it's, I'm gonna go with two that were kind of both for the same interview. But there was a show that I don't think very many people saw, and it kind of goes back to me just like really loving kid actors. That was on Amazon called Paper Towns recently.
Yes.
Did you watch that?
That sounds familiar, but I didn't watch it.
Not Paper Towns, Paper Girls.
Paper Girls.
Oh,
Paper Towns is a
Amazon. No, it was on
different thing.
Amazon.
Paper
Oh,
Girls.
I was like, why is
Amazon.
that semi?
Amazon.
I
Paper
loved
Girls.
that
I was
show.
like, I knew what you were talking about because it was so good.
I think that cast was freaking amazing.
They were great.
Those girls were fantastic. And similarly, this was not what I was going to say, but I'm like, did I finish last night? I think I finished, or did I fall? I'm pretty sure I finished last night, Under the Bridge. The Julie Schubert cast. There are some amazing young people in that show. Kudos to Julie on those teens. Really great teenagers. I think I'm a sucker for really great teenagers. So those two. And then side not young people, I think Jury Duty was amazingly cast.
Oh my gosh.
That was unbelievable because there were so many different layers that had to be accomplished.
I'm in awe.
Well, you had to know the potential of the performers to think on their feet, let alone what they did in the room in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And
the dad, the judge is Ike Barinholtz's dad.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, what?
It
like
tracks.
when I hear things like that, or like that one of the actors on Maisel, I forget who she played, a real life person was the partner of the casting director, right? Cindy's partner played.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
and she's perfect. She actually looks like her. I don't know why I can't think of her name right now, but she took on Robert Moses. I love stories like that. It's just sort of fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, so those are but there are so many. I mean, those are the recent ones that pop into my head. But
I think we often, when we talk about Murphy Brown, we often talk about the fact that there are multiple characters in the show that, had they not been cast the way they were, I don't think they would read as positively. We have, it's a great ensemble show, but there are multiple times where you can see those moments, especially in a long running show, where the writing of the character starts to be influenced by the choices of the actor and you start to see them merge. And for example, one of my favorites is Eldon is in lesser hands than Robert Pastorelli's. I think he would have been a complete creep.
Very interesting perspective, and absolutely agree. Yeah. And I think we say that to actors all the time, that you need to bring yourself to the roles. Like when you're making these choices, the thing that makes it unique is your own spirit. You have to bring yourself into that. And I think that is, and having never had the opportunity to meet them, I think that there obviously was that thing. And yeah, totally. That's a huge thing is how do you avoid the creep factor and become so endearing and beloved?
Yes.
Is quite the opposite of being a creep.
But we recently actually talked about his casting and also his reason for leaving the show, which brought up us talking about contracts and the differences. But we weren't aware, so I'm sure you weren't aware. But the story was that the reason he left the show was they wanted to decrease his order, but they didn't want to pay him for the entire season. But they also didn't want him to do any other work. And we were appalled at that. So they were holding him to a contract, but not paying him for the full contract. And he said no. He's like, I'll do it if I can do other work, but you can't stop me from making more money or doing other artistic achievements just because you want me in less episodes and you want to pay me less. And then before they could give him a counter,
Yeah.
And before they could give him a counter offer, he had already booked another job. So they lost him.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things where certainly some shows take actors for granted, and they're supposed to be so grateful and don't think about. And again, this doesn't just only apply to our business. I think this happens in industries across. When somebody's been a really diligent, excellent worker for a period of time, they figure they'll always be there. and it doesn't matter how you compensate them. And so good for him.
It also says a lot about having good representation and people who can encourage you to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
That perhaps you don't know that you can say that's actually not okay, or I am actually worth we talk about this a lot as far as, gender disparity, but knowing what other people are making and asking for so that you can advocate, and him being able to do that, he was right.
Yeah. And I think that hopefully that's, I think the next generation is certainly doing a good job of advocating for themselves in that way. Sometimes it goes like overboard in that, like, people's experience should be, I think, people's experience should allow them to make more than somebody who's fresh to the job. But I think that it's certainly the next generation is advocating for themselves a whole lot more than my generation did. I think there was a middle ground as well.
When it comes to casting, what do you think is the biggest misnomer? What is the biggest thing that you feel that people misunderstand about casting?
I think a lot of actors really just don't know what casting directors do. I really don't think that they know, especially these days when they're not live in a room with a casting director, it's such like a mystery as to what's happening. But even before, I think it's like they know. It's kind of like when I was a kid and I didn't know what a casting director was, and I knew about auditions. I kind of think it's similar with a lot of actors, where it's like we're in the room, we read, we leave, and that's it. Or we send a tape, whatever. And the amount of advocating that we do for actors on a daily basis for every role, I think is a huge thing that people do not realize. Certainly there are unkind people in every industry, but I think that a lot of actors come in thinking that the casting director is going to be unkind. And I think most of us are actually pretty kind. I could be wrong, but I think that for the most part, at least the ones that I like to affiliate with, we're in this to give actors jobs and create pieces. And I think that, sometimes it becomes a little cliche to be like, we're on your team, but like we are on your team. And we balance, again, going back to sort of like negotiating and deals, we balance a line between advocating for the actor and also advocating for production when it comes to deal making. But we will always go back to producers and say, you got to treat the actor better. You got to do this. Like we kind of are like HR for actors for a lot of things. And it's like, oh, you can't do that. Or it's a matter of having those conversations with agents as well. When the agent comes to me and says they're not comfortable with that, and me saying to producers, this is why they're not comfortable with that. And so I think that that's something that a lot of certainly actors don't realize. Probably the general public doesn't realize.
Yeah, I think it fits into the reminder that if the actor does well, then you do well, and everyone's job is fulfilled. We all want you to be the answer, because then we look smart.
100%. But it goes beyond that too. And just like, we want to hire people we think are great for the role, but we also want to hire good people, and who will be pleasant on set and who will make the whole production in its entirety a good thing. So I think it's sort of that's something also that with the advance of technology we've had to figure out too, because when we used to be in the room with someone, you get a little bit more of a sense of who they are. And certainly I know there have been plenty, I could think of dozens of examples of people who I was fooled by in a room where I thought, oh, they're so great. They're like the nicest person ever. And then they get to set and directors are like, no. And I only know their audition persona, but that means they're really good actors too, because they definitely fool me. But we do have instincts And you can kind of, when you're live with somebody, you can get that energy of who you feel like will be a benefit to this production, not just with their acting. And that goes away when you're talking about self-tapes and you don't really know them so much. And we very much try to Zoom with everybody who we do not know before we send them to set, even if it's just a quick little chat that I'm not sending somebody that I don't know to set. But I do think that, certainly if it's a teensy tiny part, maybe not. But for the most part, we want to make sure that they can take direction, and we want to make sure that they can at least conduct themselves in a 5-minute interview like a nice normal human being, and we'll see what happens once they get to set. But it does take away from that aspect of an audition, of just getting an energy. Again, from an HR perspective, it's like, if you have a job interview that's live, you know if you're going to be somebody who fits with our work environment versus not.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest thing that a lot of actors don't quite understand. At least I used to work at an acting school and a pay-for-play school, so like I kind of saw it, whereas it's not just about your talent, it's about someone that people actually want to work with. And also that your reputation is on the line as much as the actor's reputation is on the line.
Yes.
Absolutely. And if I like you, like if I just think you're like a nice person, and like we generally have, I'm not saying like it has to be like long amounts of banter, but just like a nice, like, oh, how are you? How are your kids? Whatever, small talk, but like in a genuine way, I'm going to root for you a little bit more than someone who is a complete jerk to me.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just, at the end of the day, it's human interaction. People want to work with who they want to work with.
Absolutely.
But even you see people who will like be rude to the monitor, thinking like, well, that's not the important person, as if you shouldn't be kind to everybody. And then it's like, why do you not think that person is going to tell other people or is actually a casting director or will be one day or is someone's partner or friend, or like, why do you think that that's not going to get back to them, let alone just be kind? It boggles my mind.
Don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah, it's not that hard.
I mean, it's the thing we tell everyone in musical theater, like, be nice to that accompanist.
Yes.
Because that's the first person anybody asks. And also, they can make or break your audition in a second.
Hell yeah.
So we, of course, on this podcast, love nostalgia. We love talking about not just Murphy Brown, but just the television in general that inspired us to be artists, but also that inspired other parts of television. So when you were growing up and wanting to be a casting director, what television did you watch that inspired you?
I could talk about this for a whole other hour. This is a long combo, but 100% number one, when I said I was like watching credits, like that, my number one first casting director I noticed watching credits was from Another World, was Johnson Lift Casting.
Nice.
I was a huge soap opera person as a kid, and it was my first dream was to be a casting director on a soap opera. That was 100% what I was going to do. And I kind of not purposely skipped that in my earlier conversation about becoming casting director, but I definitely, I feel like I got that as I got to work at CBS daytime casting. I worked there I worked at CBS for 4 years. I worked in daytime for 3. And I very much connected with a lot of people in this business based on my love of soap operas. Like I was soap opera girl. That was my thing.
What were your soaps?
Have evolved. My soaps. Yeah. So originally as a toddler, like I was super young.
Oh no, I watched them in kindergarten with my mom.
I started as a child.
Yeah.
Like a small child. Like kids do not know what it was like to just watch things that were so incredibly inappropriate with your parents.
I was a child and I hated anyone named Stefano.
How many Stefanos did you know?
Apparently several. If I saw it, I was angry.
I remember putting my Barbies in a bed. And I don't know what I did, but what I remember is after a play date, my mother coming to me, because she was very, very open. Like my mother didn't have any hang-ups. I remember the sex talk like very early, but I watched soaps with her. I know that's why I did that. And she just said, So when you have a friend over, maybe you don't play with the Barbies in the bed.
I actually remember when I was in second grade, I had chicken pox for 2 full weeks. And that is when I was completely soap operas, all like completely in. But I was watching from a younger age, but that was when I was like all in second grade. And I was Days of Our Lives in Another World were my mom's soaps. And then when I got older and I was like high school age, well, middle school, high school maybe, there was the edition on NBC of Santa Barbara for a period of time. My mom never watched Santa Barbara, but I watched it. And then that went off the air and I switched to General Hospital. And I became a huge high school. I was General Hospital. I mean, I was always Days of Our Lives Another World. And then there was the General Hospital edition. So those were my core 3. And then I discovered CBS soaps when I interviewed for the job at CBS.
Oh,
and this I knew they existed, but my mom was NBC girl.
Yeah, no, everyone I know watched NBC and ABC. I don't know what it was with my mother, but she
like,
only watched CBS.
Specific. Well, that was the thing that also is how things have changed these days, right? Like nobody has loyalty to a television network these days, even a streamer. Nobody's like, I only watch Netflix.
Yeah.
It's very much like everybody's watching everything. But then it wasn't just the soap operas. My mom was like hardcore NBC loyal in Today Show, NBC News. My dad still is very much NBC News.
I can see that, yeah. It's just what's on.
Well, we were Good Morning America people.
We were Today Show people.
Kind of stick to that. But yeah, I was actually kind of a fun casting story. I'll call them out. My very first, after the Lynn Kressel internship, which was amazing, and I actually was hired as paid because it was an unpaid internship. That's what things were back then. I was hired paid for a few weeks to work on a pilot and a film. But my first paid casting job full time was at Stuart Howard Casting, which was mostly theater. And I worked with Howard Meltzer, who's still one of my best friends, and he's an LA casting director. And he was big into soaps. He was an ABC soap dude, and we would watch soap operas during our lunch periods in his office at periods of time. Then he kind of got me a little. We would kind of go back and forth between the ABC and NBC because he was ABC. But my very first day at Stuart Howard, they had, I'm pretty sure, I don't remember what the auditions were for, but they were having auditions. I want to say it was for a commercial based on my memory. They had a commercial studio next to our office, so it wasn't the same door. And I was ill prepared because it was my very first day on the job. And Stephen Schnetzer, who played Cass Winthrop on Another World, walked into the wrong door and came into our office. And I literally cannot, I go, you're Cass Winthrop. And I knew his real name because I knew all the actors who played all the roles. I knew his name was Stephen Schnetzer, but I didn't say you're Stephen Schnetzer. I said you're Cass Winthrop, and the show had been off the air for a while at that point. And he goes, I used to be. And he was so kind. He was so nice. And after that, I auditioned him many, many times, and he's always the sweetest and nicest. And that was my first, and to this day, I don't get so starstruck by movie stars, but if there's somebody from my childhood or a soap opera,
it's different. We've talked about that. It's just a different thing.
Yep. I can't talk, or stupid things come out, or all the things, soap opera people, for sure. So so that's the soap nostalgia. And then I think I'm pretty classic with my 80s, 90s, certainly Murphy Brown, Kate Nally was a big one for me still. Oh yeah. Love Kate Nally, and also drew me to Lynn Kressel cast Kate Nally, so it drew me to that office. People were like Law and Order, and I was like, she used to cast Kate Nally. I mean, I feel like I'm a stereotype. Facts of Life, Growing Pains, all of those good 80s, 90s sitcoms. Big, huge fan.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about Facts of Life a lot on social media, particularly. That's when I knew, like, oh, this is a person who has the same aesthetic as I do.
There you go. It's so good. And it holds up.
It
Golden
does.
Girls. I watch Golden Girls.
Golden Girls is amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
my dog has, well, she's I'm like, she's in the room. I don't want to offend her. She's come long strides with separation anxiety. She's huge. She's doing amazing. But I leave the TV on for her when I leave the house. And I leave Golden Girls on for her. I'm like, it's my dog's favorite show.
Hey.
And certainly when I come home, I appreciate that the Golden Girls are on. And then I will plop myself on the couch for a little bit when I first walk home. And it's just like, Golden Girls are the ones that hold up. The shows like Golden Girls that hold up just are amazing to me. Not my era, but I watched a ton of Mary Tyler Moore holds up.
Mm-hmm. Same. Dick Van Dyke. Yeah.
Dick
Well, I
Van
think we were
Dyke.
lucky because we had TV Land. And
TV
so,
Land.
Exactly.
yeah.
I mean, I was Nick at Night.
Mm-hmm.
I watched all of that Patty Duke. I don't know if that holds up as well. Mary Tyler Moore really holds up.
Oh, yeah. Also, I'm not even lying. I just have to say this. My spouse and I just moved into a new home. Our two cats are handling it the way they're handling it. I currently have them in another room watching Murder, She Wrote.
Was that what you did?
Because that's what I watch all the time, and they're calm.
It's a comfort show. There's like these comfort shows, and Golden Girls was that for me. And that was just like, when I first started leaving the TV on for her, I would just turn on the TV and not think about it. And I started to realize that it was a lot of CNN. And like, I was like, this is not comforting. And this is
Relaxing.
I was like, this is not what we are trying to do to get rid of your anxiety.
No.
And so I had switched to the Hallmark channel at some point, in which the Golden Girls come on at a certain hour every night. And so there was one night I came home and Golden Girls were on, and I was like, now this is more like it. And then so I always started to do that. And she was chilling on her bed and like was totally like so calm, watching, happy. So those are my nostalgia. I feel like I'm sure there's a million more. I wish they streamed, or not streamed, but I wish things were on more.
Yeah, there's really it's harder to find older things now, and I know that there's a whole renaissance of hard copy and physical media, which is great, but even those are very hard to find. You know, I know people who go to swap meets and, you know, old video stores in LA that like particularly have, you know, old stuff. Or like with Murphy Brown, the problem is that it's the music rights. And so because of the music rights, you can't watch it legally. There are places to watch it, but you can't watch it legally, which means that most people aren't watching it. And, you know, obviously we don't want to promote people not getting residuals, but there isn't really a call for it, I think, because it's been out of the zeitgeist for so long, unfortunately. And that was why we started the podcast. We thought that we could sort of remind people, and this is before it was actually available as it is. Yeah, and revived. Yeah, we just got it right before. We had no clue. But it was on antenna TV. Like there's a lot of sort of nostalgia cable channels where you can watch it, but it is edited. So there is a lot of it that is just gone to time, which is unfortunate. But we do have a campaign going, hopefully, to get one of the streamers, if they can pay for the music rights, then the show could come back, hopefully.
It should. I mean, I just feel like I don't need reboots. I really don't. I just need the old ones easily accessible. I feel like Mad About You was another one of those for me, where like I was like, I wish they didn't do the
One of my favorite
reboot.
finales ever.
That's the best finale. That was the best finale.
It spoiled me.
They accomplished so much in that hour, and it still marveled by it. Like, and it still stands up. And I was also glad that they didn't sort of, you know, in the reboot, which I did watch, you know, like Will and Grace did, where they completely like redid their great finale. So at least like they let that sort of stand, even though she's not Jeannie Garofalo, you know, in the reboot. They still made it so that it worked, which I was glad about. But that's always one of my like top 3 favorite finales.
Yeah, I absolutely agree on that. Yeah, it was really good. And I feel like that used to repeat a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, we're only 100 years into film and TV, less less for television, obviously. There was a director who brought that up, that, in the whole scope of, forms of entertainment, this is actually, quite new. And so we're not used to having such a bulk of a legacy where things are just getting lost. You think things are going to be there forever, and they're just not.
Right. Yeah. It's good. Good point.
It's all ephemeral. Well, that I don't want to end on a sad note.
Yeah, it's just like watching things. As a kid is always going to, bring you that nostalgia. But I also think that there was something to the kind of what we were talking about earlier. But like when you're 22 episodes and you're also watching it from like week to week, and you're watching it for 7 years, it's like 7 years of yourself being engrossed with those characters, opposed to now you can kind of forget about the characters because you're only taking a few days to watch a whole series and you're not as attached. And the same thing with soap operas. When you're watching them every single day in your life, it's like those people are so completely connected to you.
Well, I have a completely ridiculous question for you, which is the space I love to live in. If you had to sit Murphy Brown down with one soap opera character for dinner, who would you force her to dine with?
Oh, that's so good. That's very difficult.
This could go so badly.
That's a great question.
I love it. Okay, Murphy, she's having dinner. She's not interviewing.
Yeah, she's forced to sit at dinner.
Forced to sit at dinner.
Mm-hmm. Like, personally, I want the puppet from Passions. She would lose her mind.
Forgot about the puppet.
Oh. So funny. I think I'd rather like her be in more of like a friendly space with like somebody who can like go toe to toe with in a respectful.
I mean, we love watching her banter. It's delicious.
Like I always love, and I'm not obviously as in Murphy Brown as you guys are. So it's been a beat since I've seen it, but the episode where all the journalists guest star. It's like Katie Couric and Diane Sawyer.
Oh, her shower?
Like, come over,
when all
shower,
the female...
yeah.
Isn't Connie Chung there too?
No. Connie is not there.
Connie's
It's all daytime. Yeah. But Connie did come...
Oh, right.
Connie is in a different episode, which we have covered, where she parodies journalists who go on sitcoms as themselves. Yep. She comes on and mocks Murphy for going on a sitcom as herself. It's it's really well done. Yeah.
So freaking good. I like that like connection she had with those people. So I think like a good Marlena Murphy, they could like have a good solid chat, right? Like I feel like that would be like a really good meal.
I think they'd have really interesting perspectives on feminism.
And
sure. Like standing up for yourself against this male-dominated world.
Yeah, I feel like that might be like the easy answer as opposed to the puppet from Passions, but
love chaos.
Well, she doesn't.
Yeah,
Murphy and puppets don't mix very well.
They don't.
Murphy and puppets do not mix well.
Candace would probably not be amused by that option.
I mean, anyone with a personality disorder or something, I think would be fun.
Ooh, I personally would take a different character. I would put Corky in a room with Sammy.
Fun. Awesome.
So since we are on Murphy Brown, as we end our lovely discussion with you, what are your memories of Murphy Brown that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, no, I think it kind of just goes into now I'm like getting flashes of a very distinct memory of having a nosebleed while watching Murphy Brown.
Oh no.
Actually, like sitting in front of the TV, like too close to the TV, and having to leave to like change tissues and like take care of my nosebleed, but not wanting to miss Murphy Brown. That's
something that I would probably do. It's over. Just wait till it's over.
But I think that it's comfort. It's all the things we talked about. But I think in general, she was an inspiring character. It's like a women and feminism and knowing there was something about the workplace and like wanting to be in a workplace where you had that camaraderie and she still had a power dynamic, but it was all, I don't know. I think there was something very aspirational there as a kid. I definitely was very, I'm sure a lot of jokes probably went over my head, but I think that in general, the dynamics were very much that one that I aspired to. Like, it was like, oh, these are very strong, distinct, again, character driven, those characters. And it kind of goes back to, like, I liked the idea for being friends with these other journalists. Like, I liked the.
So is there anything that you would like to tell us, a story that you think is really informative, something about you as a casting director that you want people to know, something that we haven't covered?
I feel like we've been pretty thorough. I
Good.
don't know.
We have done this before.
Oh, you guys are great. I don't think so. Not off the top of my head. I don't think. I'll just say that I will go back to the aspirational of, like, okay, I'll tie it all together with what I just said about Murphy Brown, and that I wanted to be part of a work environment like Murphy, and I definitely have that at Laura Rosenthal Casting. We are a family. We're all very different, but we, like, have the dynamics of that. And I think, there are some things that, from our childhoods that stick in. And I don't think that I would be able to work in an environment that didn't necessarily have that kind of support and banter. And we're humorous and all of that stuff. So that's something
great.
I feel like people don't know.
Well, before you go, I do want to share with you a casting story from Murphy Brown that we are fascinated with, and I want to partake it because I think that you, as a casting director now, will find it fascinating, because it's the kind of story that could not happen today.
Nope. Speaking of that technology.
Yes. So, and we've talked about it with Grant Shaw, and we've talked about it with Barnett Kellman and Diane English, and then we have talked about how we've heard about the story. But pretty much, they had cast someone as Miles Silverberg, and then last minute, like the next day, Diane English was like, no, I really feel like, I know we had to choose him because we were on the wire, but it's not working. So they put a whole bunch of people on tape, like everyone who had been on tour with Brighton Beach Memoirs, pretty much. Sent this VHS cassette, because it's 1988 or 87, I guess, really. Well, 88, because of the strike. That's right, it was 88. And so they send this over, and they put stars on the people that they think that they should look at. But they have to fast forward through the other actors to get there. They can't put them in the trash. They can't edit them out. They have to put it all on this one tape. So they're fast forwarding through Grant Shaw, and there was something about him that they liked, and they went back and watched the audition, and he was not starred. Amazing. And then they flew him out that day, and he didn't even have time to go home to get clothes. Like, they had to buy him underwear.
Yep.
That's incredible.
And it's really, it's so incredible. And, I've been a reader where I've seen, Tony Award winning actors auditions in the trash on a desktop. Yep. To see that this unknown actor, just something about him, even silent, made them go, oh, who's that? And it's a beautiful story, but also it's sad because it would never happen today because of the technology.
What we do have, and what does happen, is two things. Sometimes there are other actors and actors reel.
Oh, of course.
We've had that happen before, where it's like, wait, who's that person? And there have been readers, especially in self-tape land. We're like, who are you reading?
Oh, even in self-tapes? That's great.
Who's that? It will at least give them, the reader, the opportunity based on it, not necessarily cast them. But yeah, VHSs were wild.
And again, only so many can fit on a tape.
Only so many. And when I worked at CBS, we were on VHS, and we would make a dupe, and they duped in real time. So it was like, if we had like a 2-hour session, we'd be like, we'll come back for you in a few hours.
Oh,
We'd come back, and then we would FedEx those tapes to the executives in LA for them to then. But we did a similar. I don't remember necessarily like having stars versus not having stars. I think what we did actually was, as we went, while we were in the audition room, you could record over somebody.
Fair. That is true. Yeah.
And so then your final product at the end was just the people that you liked, which was, now I watch things back constantly. And so like that, you had to decide on the spot more.
Maybe they were in such a hurry that they didn't get to
just been a different system,
casting director,
different system. Because I remember the way we had to like rewind was kind of very annoying to like hit it at the right spot.
Oh yes, I remember that from my childhood.
That takes a long time. Yeah. So it was probably a technology situation on their end too, of just being like, just watch these people at these timestamps or whatever it might be. But definitely. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
My favorite part about that is the fact that knowing Grant Shaw's energy, knowing Miles, the fact that it was Grant Shaw at double speed. It's just, he's already quite caffeinated. Like, who is that?
Also, just fast forwarding and being able to see them as you're fast forwarding.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot there, as opposed to just the click that we do now.
Yep.
I would love to keep talking to you for another hour, but thank you so much.
I really appreciate you guys inviting me and having this conversation. It's super fun.
Thank you. We've been wanting to, have someone come on and talk about the process, and you just felt like the perfect person to do it. So I'm so glad that you enjoyed it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to our interview with Jodi. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did. We hope to bring you more sort of behind the scenes and different elements of not just the writers and the actors as we have, but also hair and makeup.
Please let us know if there's any element of television and film production that you're particularly interested in. I know that as a young person, I was fascinated by editing. So if there's anything that you've had a question about and you would love for us to seek out someone to talk about it, let us know.
So I think that's a great idea, Jesse. Yeah, please let us know. We love television, and we want this podcast to be about our love of TV and the 90s as well as Murphy Brown. We want to see how the sausage is made, actually.
Always. Always. Thank you for listening, friends.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, please show us your support by
liking,
subscribing,
and interacting with us on social media.
Our handle everywhere is
@MurphyBrownPod.
You can also email us at
MurphyBrownPod@gmail.com.
or visit our website at
MurphyBrownPod.com.
Share us with your friends.
Give us a 5-star rating
wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can also support the podcast by checking out our Patreon.
You can donate once
or be a recurring subscriber
and access exclusive deep dives on Murphy Brown and other related topics,
as well as bonus content we had to cut for time.
100% of what you donate goes toward creating this podcast.
So any way you are able to support, we deeply appreciate.
And we'll see you next time
for another edition of FYI,
the Murphy Brown Podcast.